Hi BookTube, this is a book review with a long preamble because this particular book took me 26 years to get hold of. It was a quest. So I just want to fill in the background as to why it was so important to me that I read it before talking briefly about it. So in the late 1970s, early 1980s, anything that was good about music sort of disappeared as trends moved on, as we hit an economic retrenchment, which meant that people wanted escapism in music, and we had things like the new romantics and synth music rather than guitars, plus that a lot of the really interesting bands of the very early 80s had split up either due to musical differences or because band members had died. So Joy Division became synth-led band New Order after the death of lead singer Ian Curtis. Gang of Four sort of got into funk and away from their interesting angular new wave. Johnny Rotten, aka Johnny Lydon's Public Image Limited, which had threatened a really radical fusion of sort of new wave and dub reggae, unfortunately became very conventional, with just about selling units. The Au Pairs split up because the lyricist and lead singer fell out with her bandmates about money, who was entitled to what, and she left her new wave band and went and trained to become a lawyer, etc, etc, etc. So it wasn't until the mid-80s when there was an uptick, an upsurge in music, and this time from the other side of the pond, from New York, where we had interesting bands like Sonic Youth and Swans coming in at the end of the no-wave movement in New York. New York at the time, no one wanted to live there. It was before it was cleaned up. So there was lots of cheap rental properties that their landlords hadn't burned out, or possibly they had, for the insurance. And because they could afford to live in New York on relatively little money, some really interesting art, practitioners of art were attracted to the city. And as I say, in music, we got interesting bands like Swans and Sonic Youth. And Swans were a band I sort of happened to see by accident, because I'd gone to see my favourite British band, The Fall, who had managed to see off all of these worrying trends in music and ploughed their own perverse furrow, still doing what they had started out doing. And they were supported by a band called Swans, who I knew nothing about, never heard of, didn't realise they were American. And because I wear glasses, I've never worn contact lenses because I'm squeamish about touching my eyes or getting close to my eyes. I always have to try and get close to the stage, not only so I can see better, but also the closer you are to the stage, the less you're going to be thrown about, you know, like a dog toy, through the mosh pit. So Swans came on, plugged in, and then started probably still the loudest gig that I've ever heard. Maybe Sonic Youth beat them. And most people were driven away to the bar by the volume. I was determined to see it out and keep my place near the front, but I did sort of figuratively have my fingers in my ears. And I didn't really think much of them either way, really. But then a couple of months later, I was listening to the radio DJ guru John Peel, now sadly passed away, and he played a track by Swans called Clay Man, and instantly my body remembered the rhythm from the concert, because it's a very slow, heavy drone type of music, and I was blown away by the sort of the record version, reigniting my sort of body, not muscle memory, sort of cellular memory of the rhythm from the concert. So I went out and bought that album, and I looked at the lyrics because I'm pretty sure they were reproduced on the sleeve, and they were really interesting. They were all about power relations, I, you, no names. Sometimes the power was switched between the but they were really sort of honed down, naked explorations of power relationships. Cop being a cop, beating someone with a nightstick or a truncheon. Clayman literally being someone as if made out of clay in terms of how they were manipulated by their master, you know, the person with the power in the relationship, all this sort of stuff. And that came out in 1984. And I was a fan, I was hooked. And I saw them several times live, and actually they were a really good live band as well. They put on a really good show. And I learned that in 1995, Gira had published through Henry Rollins's nascent publishing company a collection of short stories called The Consumer. And it wasn't that easy to get hold of. It was obviously quite a low print run, and I sort of missed the boat. And I was interested mainly because I wanted to see how his lyrics, which were very sort of concise and, as I say, honed down, compared to his short stories. Although I don't think I was ever aware that it was a sort of 236-page collection. I thought it was a much shorter book. And I sort of had it in my mind that probably the stories were more like flash fiction length rather than short story length. And some of them in the collection are flash fiction length, but you know, it's a proper collection of short stories, which I hadn't anticipated. Anyway, so I couldn't get hold of the book, and I've told this story several times in several BookTube videos, and I promise you this will be the last time, now that my quest has come to an end, this will be the last time I tell this story. So I managed to track down either Gira's address or the address of his record company. And I sent in an airmail envelope, I don't know if you remember them, they sort of have those sort of coloured chevrons around the edges, denoting that it was an airmail letter. I sent him a $50 note that I happened to have from a family trip to the US, and, or was it 20? It might be 20 actually, I can't remember now. And I put a note in saying, look, I know I shouldn't send money through the post, but I can't get hold of your book any other way, I don't know how to do it. You know, I hope this is okay. And I heard nothing for 6 months. And then one day, an airmail envelope arrives through the post, and I open it. There's nothing in there. Oh, that's odd. And I sort of scrutinise it. I see it's come from America by the postmark and the stamps. Then I notice that inside the chevrons, running down from one side across the middle and then back up, which I don't know how one could do that in a typewriter, but anyway. It wrote, if you shouldn't, don't. So he'd had me money, but I didn't feel angry or cheated. I felt suitably chastised because I shouldn't have done it that way. And he answered me. I thought it was very funny, actually. But ever since then, so that'd be about 97, so, you know, nearly 25 years, I've been trying to get hold of this damn book. Was always scouring the second-hand, you know, markets of eBay and Amazon and things like that, and other sites, and it was just far too expensive. Twice I nearly hit the button before realising it was the German version, which seems to be much more readily available. So, you know, this was my number one book that I wanted to read. It was in my bucket books list on that video, and it was because I did that video, I don't know what, a month ago, that someone with a BookTube channel called Bottling Books pointed out to me that book is now available on Scribd, so at least I could read it. Okay, I wasn't going to own it, but I could read it. So I've never been a member of Scribd, so I did the introductory 1 month subscription, free subscription. It did mean I'd have to read on my computer screen, laptop computer screen, which I find really difficult to read. So I started the first few stories, and then I didn't get back to it because I was reading some wonderful other books, and I don't like reading on screen. And I realised that, you know, that it was coming up to the end, to a month, and I was either going to have to let it renew automatically, or I was going to have to unsubscribe, which was what I wanted to do, but then I better read the damn book. So I did read the rest of it over 2 days over the weekend, and it's not very good. Now, part of the problem, I think, is, you know, I'd built it up in my mind over 25 years, so I don't think it ever stood a chance of living up to that expectation. Another thing is, I don't listen to Swans hardly at all these days. Their music was very much of their time. Interestingly, they have changed radically to a much softer, more harmonious thing, which at that point I stopped listening to. I stopped buying the records and listening to Swans because I wasn't interested in that sound. But the sound that I did really like, and I ought to say it's one of the first ever music reviews I did of a concert of theirs, but yeah, that's by the by. I don't listen to it anymore, and I think it would have been really important for me to have read this book in the 90s, not 25 years later, when I've kind of moved on mentally, emotionally, artistically, musically, in the music I listen to. So I think it suffered for that as well. So just to give you an idea, I'm not going to go into great detail about it. All the stories are the same, pretty much. They are stories of power, like the songs, but over an extended length, they don't work nearly as well because you have to put in too much incidental detail, which have absolutely been stripped away in the songs and what makes the songs so powerful, I think. And they are stories of power, of one person lording it over at least one or others, through sex, through violence, through cannibalism, through torture, bodily functions, through hooking up mechanisms whereby they exchange, literally physical things with one another. A lot of them are about one person wanting to get inside another to inhabit them or possess them, physically as well as emotionally. And it was all a bit tedious, really. It was all a bit dated. Seen this sort of thing done better. So I was hugely disappointed. I gave it 3 stars. But it's really 2.5 stars, I think. But emotionally, I have closure because I tracked down this book, thanks to Bottle Imp Books, I have to say, and I managed to read it after all this time, after all these years, even though it, in retrospect, it was the quest, the idea of a quest that kept me sort of driving on, rather than the quality of what that quest was. I think probably deep down, if I'd examined myself, I would have known that it was just not that big a deal anymore. But it had grown and grown and grown as a quest in my mind that it was still a big deal. So there you have it, my review of Michael Gira's The Consumer. Okay, I'm going to do in a separate video, just because I don't think these 2 books deserve to be in the same video. I'm going to talk about my review of Richard Powers' shortlisted book Bewilderment, because this is a wonderful read, and I think I don't want it to be sullied by being in the same video as a long personal story of unrealistic expectations, and for what turned out to be not a very good book. So bear with me. Both of these videos will be published at the same time. Okay, so till the next video.